Okay, thank you. Thank you all so much for being here today and for sticking around for all the wonderful sessions we've had today. Our last session of this year's annual meeting concerns a topic that has been in the news a lot lately: data center development. Northwestern Energy has expressed their intent to provide service to multiple data centers in our state, a move that has the potential to double the energy need of Northwestern. This proposed development raises a lot of questions and concerns about ratepayer financial impacts on our natural resources, and how our utility plans to actually provide this power to these huge energy customers. These are conversations and questions that are being asked all across the country as technology companies are quickly and frequently putting out plans to build data centers, seems like everywhere. However, coupled with these proposed projects is a ton of grassroots organizing aimed at making sure that the health of our communities are not affected. To talk about this today, I'm happy to welcome Nicole Sugarman. Nicole is a seasoned professional in sustainable ag and food systems and is currently serving as senior campaign manager at Kairos Fellowship. Prior to this role, Nicole held various leadership positions at Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Working Group, where she managed the policy program and served as interim director. Her other roles have included food access director at East Park Revitalization Alliance, farm manager at Weaver's Way Co-op, and urban agriculture educator at Penn State Extension, among others. Nicole has a Master of Science in Social Policy from the University of Pennsylvania and a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Science from Wesleyan University. Please help me in welcoming Nicole Sugarman.
Thank you so much, Scott, for that introduction. And thank you so much to the Northern Plains Resource Council for having me today. Like Scott said, my name is Nicole. I'm a senior campaigner at Kairos. And I've always cared about the environment and loved nature since being a little kid. That led me to study environmental science in college and become a small-scale farmer after college. But desperate to make as big an impact as I could, I went into agricultural policy from there and ended up doing tech policy and organizing at the intersection of tech and climate change. So getting to speak to an audience of ranchers and farmers in my current work is a true joy for me. I have two kids, one is 6 and one is 3, so I am extremely motivated to ensure the world I leave to them is livable, enjoyable, and a place where not only they, but their entire generation can flourish. Kairos, the organization for which I work, aims to build a multiracial movement to hold tech accountable. Our campaigns take on big tech's harms to working class communities. We offer political education, collaborative campaigning, and rapid response to address the impacts of AI, corporate power, and big tech's harms to our people, our planet, and our lives. So we're here to talk today about data centers. Let me see if I can get this clicker to work. Oh, there we go. Okay, so when I started working on tech and environment, I wasn't super focused on data centers yet. My work spanned a bunch of different issues, all of which are still important, like how tech companies help climate disinformation spread, how their entire supply chains harm communities and the planet, from the mining the minerals to manufacturing the chips, to the harmful false solutions that tech companies support, which include, things like carbon capture and storage, poorly regulated carbon offset schemes, and so on. All of these issues are still important, but as I did my work, I began to notice something, which is that tech companies' environmental footprints were getting bigger really, really fast. And this is where Kairos learned what a big threat data centers were, because as tech companies poured more money into developing and deploying AI, artificial intelligence, they began to need a lot more computer storage to train and run the models to store the data. So, and just like your home computer needs power to work, and then gets hot when it's been on for a while, data centers need power to run, but a ton, because it's like, on a scale that's just incomprehensible compared to our personal computers. and they need something to cool them down, which is either water or more energy for cooling. So data centers are really resource guzzlers. A data center is simply a warehouse that holds computers, and the computers store data. So whenever you save something to the cloud, it's being saved and stored somewhere in a data center, actually on the ground. The cloud is a real place, and it's in the data centers. Data centers have been around since the 90s, but AI uses so much more compute, which is the building blocks of computer memory and storage, that their construction has soared in the last couple of years, spurring a tech corporate race to build more and bigger facilities to store their data. And it's still speeding up, which you can see from the slide, which shows data center valuation year over year. So in 2023, there was $18.2 billion worth of data centers. In 2024, that jumped over $10 billion alone to 28.33. And it's not stopping. So the US holds the largest data center market in the world with 60% of global data center capacity. And we have more data centers here in the US than in every single other country combined. As of March 2025, we had 5,381 data centers. And that's a lot of energy, land, and water storage usage. But big tech wants way more. They estimate that they will spend around 1 trillion US dollars in the US over the course of the next 5 years. And where are all these data centers being built? In every single US state. Every state in the country has data centers either there or proposed, most likely both. And the biggest concentration of data centers is in Northern Virginia, where they started getting them in the 90s. And now it's just like data centers on top of data centers, data centers next to your daycare facility, data centers next to your cemetery, data centers next to your like rec center. It's really wild. So why are we concerned about data centers? The fact of the matter is that data centers cause a lot of harm. The first thing that I'll talk about is harms to our wallets. So data centers use so much electricity that when they come to the grid, they make all of our electricity bills go up. And this is because of kind of an outdated but made sense in the past like rule that when new infrastructure was connected to the grid, the cost was spread around because the new infrastructure allegedly, or hypothetically, and did in the past benefit everyone. But nowadays, when a data center connects to the grid, the new infrastructure benefits them alone, but yet still the cost is transferred to everyone. So in parts of the country with a lot of data centers, consumers have already seen their utility bills rise, sometimes like substantially. One recent analysis of 7 states in the Mid-Atlantic, where I live, Pennsylvania, served by the utility PJM, found that consumers were subsidizing private data centers' energy connection needs by $4.3 billion in 2024 alone. And this means that in some cases, every single person in the state or in the utilities region are paying an extra $20 each month, every month for perpetuity, just to help the data centers connect to their grid and get the power they need. And it should go without saying that we should not be subsidizing big tech's energy use, and they do not need those handouts. They have trillions of dollars. Here in Montana, Northwest Utility plans to serve at least 3 data centers that could scale up to a load of 2,250 megawatts, which is nearly twice the peak use of that utility. So this is set to become an issue here too, in the absence of state action, which we'll talk about later. We will talk about how to fight back, so don't get too depressed. Electric grid strain is also a safety issue. Data centers' massive energy use destabilizes our electric grid in some cases, increasing the risk of houses catching on fire and blackouts that cause heat and cooling to go out. I'm thinking of like the Texas blackout, where people lost their lives because they lost heat in the winter. And this is because the grid is just not prepared to unload so much energy so quickly. And of course, blackouts also mean that food can go bad in our fridge, medicines can spoil. So the other, on top of this, another harm that data centers cause to our wallets is that data centers get tax breaks. So states are actually encouraging them to come by letting them off the hook for portions of their taxes. And 42 states have partial or full tax exemptions for data centers, which means we're letting trillion-dollar companies off the hook for parts of their tax burden. And what this means in Montana, we don't know the full scope of how much money Montana is losing because the state does not disclose it. And this is fairly common. A lot of states don't disclose how much money they are losing to data centers not paying their taxes. But here's what my friend Katja said, who is like a tax expert who works for an organization called Good Jobs First. I just wanted to shout them out because they're great. So Montana, because Montana doesn't have a sales tax, it already provides big savings for data centers companies. On top of that, the state gives them a major break on property taxes. And Katja says it's actually unusual that Montana sets property taxes at the state level, because usually property taxes are set by local governments, but Montana sets them at the state level. So this is true statewide. Most business equipment in Montana is taxed at 1.5% of its value. Agricultural land is taxed at 2.05%, and on average, homes are taxed at 1.35%. Data centers are only taxed at 0.9%. Yep. So that means data centers pay significantly less in property taxes than other landowners, including the farmers that they are buying the land from. And this is so unfair. Why should a data center operator get to take valuable farmland, turn it into a data center, and pay significantly less in taxes than the farmer who previously stewarded the land? And just to put a finer point on why this matters, not only is it unfair, but property taxes are used by local governments to fund schools, fund fire protection, and building roads and bridges. So because of these special tax breaks, data centers contribute very little to these public services. Meanwhile, the tech companies worth these tax breaks are worth trillions, and they don't need this kind of public support. So the other way that data centers hurt our wallets is the reason that the states are subsidizing the come supposedly is because of economic investment. But the fact of the matter is that data centers create very few good permanent jobs. For example, a recent, just one case study, CNBC found that one Microsoft data center in Illinois received $38 million in sales tax exemptions and then created 20 permanent jobs. So this is, I don't have the exact figures right now, but this is, as you can imagine, significantly less than other economic investments. A lot of other industries create a lot more jobs for the buck. And most of the jobs created by data centers are temporary construction jobs and trades jobs, because they take a lot of people to be built. But a lot of these jobs are actually filled by people that kind of itinerant, like electricians who follow data centers around the country. So the long-term, jobs that stay in the community are very few. And when fully operational, data centers can operate with as little as 10 to 20 permanent jobs. And on top of that, many of those are subcontracted and have poor worker protections. I have a friend who used to work in a data center who made $15 an hour as a technician. And they're promising, good paying jobs. On top of that, she had to reapply for a job every 2 years with the subcontractor so that she couldn't be a permanent employee. So data centers also hurt our land and our water. So this is a quote from Amazon's CEO, which shows just how little these companies care for the communities they are building in. He says, about a year ago, this site near South Bend, Indiana was just cornfields. Today, it's one of our US data centers powering Project Rainier, one of the world's largest AI compute clusters. Just cornfields. So in this case, Amazon converted 1,200 acres of farmland in Indiana into a data center complex. It currently has 7 warehouses, each bigger than a football stadium. And Amazon intends to build 30 data centers on site. This facility will consume 2.2 gigawatts of energy, enough to power 1 million homes. Each day, it will use millions of gallons of water to keep the chips from overheating. And Amazon is not unique. Amazon is a bad actor, but Meta is building a $4 million square foot data center in Louisiana. And Project Matador in Texas is slated to use 5,800 acres of farmland in Amarillo, Texas, to build a giant data center that doesn't even have any confirmed customers. They're building it on spec. Data centers also pollute the air. They hurt our health as well. Oh, sorry, it didn't say description there, but I will describe it. Data centers are coming online so quickly and they need so much power that they're actually keeping dirty power sources on the grid that were set to retire. In some states, like in Georgia, for example, coal plants are being kept on the grid that were going to retire because of this giant new demand for energy. And this is at a time when we desperately need to decarbonize. They also run diesel generators on site to make sure they have a source of backup power for their computers, but not for us. So in this case, this picture shows xAI, which is Elon Musk's AI company. And they have a massive site in Memphis. The red spots are all the methane gas turbines. The data center runs constantly because the grid doesn't have enough power for the data center. So it's releasing methane gas into the surrounding community like 24/7. And this example is particularly bad, but most, if not all, data centers do run their backup diesel generators sometimes because they need to test them to make sure that they work. And I have not heard of a single case where the data center warns the neighboring communities so people can protect themselves from the bad air quality. A paper by researchers at the University of California estimates that by 2030, air pollution from data centers alone could cause an additional 600,000 asthma cases annually and 1,300 premature deaths in the US. And of course, it goes without saying, but like any environmental injustice, these health impacts are not borne equally. Polluting power plants and often the data centers themselves are most often located in or near poor, working class, Black, and Brown communities. So data centers also use our precious water. And this, I've heard, I talked to a couple of you before the presentation. I've heard, of course, this is paramount in Montana, as it is in many places, because obviously we need this water. But in Newton County, Georgia, for example, people's wells ran dry after Meta built a data center nearby in 2018. The situation has gotten so bad in that county that they may be in a water deficit by 2030. Residents' water bills in that county increased by 33% in 1 year. And a data center of that size uses about 50,000 gallons of water a day. But some of the new ones, as I described, some of these giant ones that are going to be 5,000 acres, will use millions of gallons of water each day. And that journalists know this because they've been able to obtain their water permits. Data centers try to hide how much water they will use from the communities in which they are built because they know the numbers are so high, they'll make people upset. So I was talking to one of the organizers, Bryce, beforehand, and he said, it's hard to find out what they're going to do. It's hard to find out any real plans. We can sometimes find, square footage. We can sometimes find energy use. Like, why is it so hard? And it's because they know that their policies and what they're doing to our communities is deeply unpopular. So, for example, a town in Oregon actually sued a local paper. The local paper tried to submit a FOIA request to get the information about how much water the local data center was using. The town sued them because they were afraid that by releasing the information, they were going to violate their non-disclosure agreement to keep the information private. When they eventually settled with the paper, because you're not allowed to do that, people learned they were using an entire third of the town's municipal water supply for this one data center. So the last thing, before we get on to the good part of how we fight back, well, second to last part, is often data centers, the tech inside the data centers is also bad for us. So not only are data centers themselves harmful to the surrounding environment, but a lot of the tech they house is used to surveil us, take away our constitutional rights to privacy. And tech companies are using AI to collect a ton of data about us without our consent that they sell and use in ways that are not in our best interest. AI is also used to help gas and oil companies extract more gas and oil. So while the companies are publicly telling us, that AI is going to solve the climate crisis, be used to cause cancer, end cancer, excuse me, they are then turning around and selling their AI products to oil companies and to militaries who use it to help kill people. So the reality of what they're doing does not line up with what they are telling us that they're trying to do with the technology. And lastly, as I said, all of this is hidden behind NDAs. So we often do not know when they are coming, who's behind a proposal, how much energy and water they will use, or what kind of information the data center is storing. And again, they tell us, like, well, you like to store pictures in the cloud. Like, we need this. This is tech infrastructure. But most of the tech inside the data centers is not being used for our pictures in the cloud. Most of it is being used for the big business, for surveillance, for data collection, for stuff that really does not serve us. Who benefits from the AI boom? I like this meme because it really drives home. We never asked for it. So they're giving it to us not for our benefit, but for theirs. The big tech companies, the big tech billionaire class uses data center, uses AI products to enhance their bottom line, collect data on us, and make money off of us. And data centers are built by the usual suspects and a few companies that are less well known. Here's just like a list, but they're really like kind of since we wrote our data center guide and compiled this list, there are a lot more companies in the game now because it's really a speculative bubble that everyone thinks they can make money off of. But the bottom line is the data center boom benefits the billionaire and even trillionaire class. I read yesterday that Elon Musk is trying to take $1 trillion paycheck from Tesla. So none of them need more money. And I also want to mention that not only is it being foisted on us, but even so, we're not the main consumers of this technology. Most of these data centers, as I said, are not built to store AI and data that we use or need. Data center operators primarily serve enterprise clients or large businesses like the military, big oil, AI companies, and cryptocurrency exchanges. So a quick story about who I want to benefit first, who benefits. So like I said, I'm a mom and my kids are in our local public school. My daughter, Lily, is a first grader. And they of course deserve the very best, and we love her school. She has great teachers. She has a great learning community, and the schools have been disinvested from for years in Philadelphia, as I manage. Is true across the country. So they're not really adequate environments for kids to be going to school. They have asbestos tiles on the floor still, and the air conditioning. Most of the Philly public schools do not have working air conditioners. So what started to happen as the climate crisis kind of heats up is at the beginning and the end of the year, my daughter actually has to be let home from school early some days because it gets too hot in the classroom for her to learn. And that's like deeply sad, and it's deeply something that we should be investing in our children, the next generation, so that they have what they need to learn. And when I think about what investments I want for my community, AI checks all of the wrong boxes. So not only is AI contributing to the climate crisis and data centers, that's actually making it too hot in the school, but they're also shirking their taxes. So they're not going to be investing in the schools to make them better. On top of that, AI is kind of hurting actually kids' education, right? So like kids are using AI now to write papers. It's the unfettered access to AI is making it harder for kids to learn. And like the AI industry is trying to insert like AI for education in ways that are actually like undermining the in-person educators who are really the gems of my kids' school experiences. So who does benefit? CEOs, private equity companies, and big businesses, not our kids and us and regular people. So that was depressing, but I have good news. We can fight back. Data center expansion is not inevitable, and we don't have to accept it. Communities are fighting and winning, and I'll just give you a few examples. In Tucson, Arizona, and that's this really cool drawing, Desert Dwellers Against Big Data, residents got a planned $3.6 billion Amazon data center project overturned when they pressure their city council to vote against annexing the development parcel so it could use city water and electricity. And this was after the city council had already voted to sell the data center, the land, but people didn't know about it then. So the fact they voted against the next step of annexing the land so they could use the water and electricity was thanks 100% to the incredibly impressive organizing that the community did. Because the city council understood how unpopular the proposal was and felt like removing their support was the smarter political move. The community did this through sustained mass mobilization in opposition to the project. They packed meetings, they got press, they drew national attention to their fight. It's also worth noting that they won. The city council rejected the proposal, and Amazon had originally said, if the town does not annex us, we're going away. Amazon came back and said, we're building the project anyway. We don't need the county's approval. So the movement remains active. So, it's not easy, but wins can be had. And the tech companies will do everything they can, to overturn those wins, but communities are still fighting and winning. In Prince George County, Maryland, community successfully won a moratorium on all new data center development for a period of time while a city task force went through and examined the impact that the data center development would have on the region. They were able to push for this moratorium at the county level by mobilizing massively in opposition to a data center that was planned at the site of a nearby mall. And the city council had actually formerly streamlined its approval process to make it easier for projects to get through. And then people found out what was going on and that data centers were planned for their community. And people said, no, we don't want this. And the city council kind of admitted, they were like, oh, we have to consider, the impact this will have on our people as well. So they got 20,000 signatures on a petition. Again, they flooded their council meetings. And then, council realized that they actually needed buy-in to move these projects forward and agreed to pause all construction. In Indiana, there's a group called the Citizens Action Council that has supported communities across the state in successfully turning down at least 6 proposals to build data centers in different communities in Indiana. Each has been either voted down at the zoning stage in their local community or withdrawn by the companies themselves after communities demonstrated how unpopular and how opposed they were to the projects. And Indiana communities have been able to do this through building pressure, through calls and emails to local officials. They pack public hearings. They have like these really cool yard signs that everyone puts that says no data center, organized Facebook groups, and running online campaigns. I have a slide of them in the next slide or a few slides later. Then in Oregon, and this is just a little snapshot of the different kinds of ways. And I purposely picked 4 different examples that all use different strategies to stopping or slowing down data centers, just to show that there's a really wide range of strategies that we can use. But in Oregon, advocates were able to get their state legislator to pass a law that required that data centers pay their own electricity bills by putting them in their own rate class. So instead of passing those costs on to everyone else, in Oregon, data centers actually have to pay for their own electricity now. And they did this by building public support, lobbying, and standing very firm to the data center operators and the big tech companies who were extremely against this law. They said it was discrimination to put them in their own rate class. Nonetheless, they did it. So we can fight back too. Here's how. The first thing is we have to be detectives, because like I said, they're hiding all this information under NDAs. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, this is the right one. They're hiding all the information under non-disclosure agreements. So it's not easy to find out when a data center proposal is coming. There's not going to be like a big bulletin in the paper. They're not going to come to your, next council meeting and say, I'm the data center operator. Let me know if we can, build in your community. We have to like track them down. And here are some places, like feel free to take a picture of this. I can also send it to Jack after the whole slideshow so that we can get it out to people who are interested. But tech company websites, utility company news, sometimes they have to announce when they will hook up to the utility, local government data, social media. In a lot of places now, they're kind of like anti-development, or like anti-extractive development groups that will kind of track and report when these when these data centers are coming. So sometimes you can like search on Facebook, like your town name and your data center and find stuff. There are some online industry maps, including data center map is one. If you just Google that, it'll come up, and they're not comprehensive, but it's a good starting place. And then cultivating a relationship with people who might know and share. So like in Philadelphia, we found out recently, well, yeah, I've heard of people who have found out just by it being leaked, from someone who has insider knowledge. So after you learn, you have to share it, because a lot of people don't know what's coming. The data center development boom has come so fast that most people, and even a lot of officials, local and state officials, aren't really aware of what a data center is or what it means for their communities. People still think, like big tech is going to be a positive, actor in our community. Like we want that cachet of partnering with a big tech firm, like, ooh, we're going to get a Google campus. And they don't understand that this is something far different and far more extractive and less actually helpful and doesn't create real jobs. So share what you learned today and what you find widely where you live. Share it in your neighborhood listserv, your community Facebook groups, your book club, wherever you can. Here are also some ideas kind of for reaching the media, for reaching your local officials, and for reaching your community. So we've had success with having people write op-eds or letters to the editor, or partnering with a local journalist who covers some sort of like community development beat. Local journalists have been awesome in actually uncovering this and helping communities get aware. And remember, your local officials work for you, so feel free to call them up, write them a letter, visit them at their office and tell them, that you're concerned about this, because they often have not heard that people are concerned or they don't know. Then we gather people together and look for the places that people are already meeting to get people organized to turn out and show up when something is moving. So as you saw in all the examples, one thing they all had in common was people packed meetings, people showed up, people held the signs, people really voiced that the community cares and the community is willing to come out for that. If you don't have a data center proposal yet, it's good to just find those places where people might be able to be activated, educate them and then get ready so that when something comes, it often comes quickly and you already have the kind of relationship in place that you can help people turn out. Then you're going to organize and advocate. So you pick your likely path and make your plan. So you want to set your goal first And the goal is, what do you want to happen with the data center? And there's no right answer. Some people want the data center to go away altogether. Some people want to make sure that the data center uses a certain percentage of renewable energy. Some people want to make sure the data center doesn't make a lot of noise and like annoy nearby residents. So you have to choose your goal. Then you choose your strategy. How are you going to get there? And that's like the path that you're walking on is your strategy. And some strategies, like I mentioned, and I'll mention more in the next section, it's a strategy might be I'm going to get my town to pass an ordinance. My strategy might be I'm going to fight for statewide legislation that makes them, pay their own electricity. And then the stepping stones that you walk on are your tactics. These are the actual things that you're doing to get to your strategy. So these are like the holding a movie, holding a film night, like going to a council meeting, circulating a petition. And each of those things kind of builds on each other and gets you closer to your goal, which is winning. So pathways to winning. These are some of those strategies that we talked about. And again, this is not like completely comprehensive. There are many of these, but I'm happy to talk after and we can expand on any of these, or I can send more information. But one tool that folks have used are like zoning, and it should be zoning and ordinances in there. Exactly how this looks depends on where you live, but it's good to, if you're concerned, get familiar now with your local zoning code if you're not already, and see like where and under what circumstances data centers can be built by right. And by right development means that they don't have to ask for community input. They don't have to hold a hearing. They can just build it, and then work to make it harder for data centers to be built by right. So a lot of times, like in Philadelphia, they can be built by right in like industrial zones. In some places, like in Texas, I've heard, this is wild to me, they have no zoning code at all, and data centers can be built by right anywhere. Cities and councils, the cities and counties, though, have successfully passed legislation that have all data centers or all large load users be subject to approval and a vote, so they can't be built without any community review. Local ordinances can also be used to prohibit or restrict data centers. So you could pass a local ordinance to put constraints on developers to maintain a certain air quality. You could pass an ordinance to, like I said, limit noise, certain water use restrictions, or you can use ordinances for transparency to force data centers to disclose how much water and energy they're using, because otherwise they will not if left to their own devices. Another pathway is state legislation. So like in Montana, for example, tax reform happens on a state level. So any kind of ending subsidies to the data centers or requiring that data centers follow certain best practices to receive the subsidies would happen on a state level. And communities have done stuff like, making sure that data centers buy renewable energy or hire locally or abide by fair local labor requirements. These are called like subsidy riders. So you have to maintain a certain standard of like excellence to receive this subsidy. And states can also, at the state level, you can also pass a moratorium, you can pass environmental requirements, or you can make transparency demands at a state level. The last pathway I'll kind of highlight right now is advocacy directly at your level of your utility. So at the utility level, or to your public utility, you can regulate how data centers connect to the grid and how they pay for their own energy. So like in the Oregon example, and I think actually this is happening in Montana as well. I read that Earth Justice, an environmental law firm, is actually supporting an effort in Montana to establish a new ratepayer class for data centers. So that would make them, at least, it won't stop them, but it will make sure that regular people are not footing their bills, which is a step in the right direction. So if you're interested in learning more about that, just Google Earth Justice Montana data center or something, it'll come up. That's how I found it. And then lastly, utilities can also require data centers to use renewable energy. That's not a stopgap, because what is hard to believe but true is that data centers are coming on board so fast that there actually is not enough renewable energy to meet their needs. So a lot of times if a data center is using renewable energy, it was renewable energy that was already slated for another project or would have gone to another project. So it's ultimately, we need to demand that data centers use additional, like new renewable energy. And to do that, they will have to slow down how fast they're building them, because they're just building them at a speed that there aren't enough renewable energy projects in the pipeline to get them all on board with the renewable energy. Like I said, this is not an exhaustive list. There are so many ways to fight back. We work with an organization called AI Now Institute, and they're putting together a compendium of all the policies that have or could be used to reform data center development from the local through the federal. And so it's not ready yet, but I just mentioned that because I'd be happy to share it with Jack, or you all if you email me when they publish it. And also important to note is that these are all examples of things that have already happened or been demanded. But in each of these cases, some community was the first to do that. So we don't have to just stop at what's been done before. We can and should organize to reimagine what's possible. So communities should have control over our public infrastructure. We should have control over our land, and there are lots of ways to kind of demand and organize to get that control together. So Elle Wood seemed out of place in law school if you've seen Legally Blonde, but she actually knew how to kick butt, and so can we. And we don't actually have to each become experts on every single aspect of data center policy. We can do this together, and that was a lot, and these fights are hard, but we already have a lot of collective knowledge in our movement, and you aren't in it alone. People have been fighting these all across the country like for 10 or 20 years at this point, and people are winning. And you know, one of Kairos's main goals is to network people together so that people can learn from each other. So how are we going to do that? We've got your back. Let's work together. Please feel free to connect with Kairos at campaigns@kairosfellows.org. We're here for strategy advice. We're here for connection to expert. We're here for research guidance. You know, what questions do we need to answer? And even comms assistance. You know, what messaging is best? You know, how should we like put together this fact sheet? I'll leave that up for 1 minute. Oh, never mind. Wait. Okay, yeah. So campaigns@kairosfellows.org. So the next thing we have going on is site fight support. This is a QR code. If you take a picture of it, it will take you right to the registration form. But if you already have a data center proposal in your neighborhood, if you have a community group that's concerned and wants to fight, you can sign up to join these site fight calls, which will happen monthly. November is actually our first one, so you get to join in on the ground floor. But it'll be a way to connect with other groups all over the country. And, you know, groups are the best, as you all know, people on the ground, people at the grassroots are the best experts in how to fight back and win, you know, so it'll be a place to share solutions, share problems, you know, share like, I'm seeing this from the company, if they said that anywhere else, share narrative stuff. And we'll be doing this monthly. And if you don't get it down now, that's okay. I will, again, I'd be happy to share it with Jack or with any of you all afterwards. We can get this sent out. The first meeting will be on November 18th at 11 a.m. your time. And they'll be every following month. So we also have resources for you. The way we kind of got into this, well, like I said, the way we got into this was through campaigning on tech and the environment, but then that led us to publishing a data center organizing guide. It's still available online. It would have been more helpful if this slide had the URLs instead of like clickable hyperlinks, because obviously you all can't click those. But if you Google Kairos Data Center Organizing Guide, you will find it and you can download it. And it has a lot of the information I've shared here and more. You can also share it with your communities. It's a great organizing tool. No Climate Results Found is our campaign to hold tech accountable for their climate impacts. And it's kind of fun and has other stuff like we did a whole unsustainability report about Google where we kind of debunked their environmental claims, and you can find other resources on that site as well. So use and share them. And that's it. Let's connect. I am so glad to be here with you all. I look forward to continuing in the movement together. And now I think we have some time for a Q&A. So please ask me all of your questions. Okay. How are we?
Hi, my name's Diane, and I was wondering, do these data centers, do they also house cryptocurrency?
Yes. In many cases they do. Yeah. And it's yes, cryptocurrency is the crypto mining facilities are essentially a data center. Yeah. Thank you for asking. But there are some different regulations depending on whether it's used for AI or crypto mining. You know, they're subject to some different regulations, and we focus mostly on AI. But if you can use any of these tools to fight a crypto mining facility in your neighborhood as well.
Hi, thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts. I was looking at a data center magazine, and one of the things they mentioned, and they were talking about pros and cons and development and anything. One of the things they mentioned is there were no regulations requiring them to disclose power, water, et cetera, consumption. Is that what you've seen as well? And
Yes.
so you know what it makes me think of is what the environmental regulations we've had to do. So that's another avenue is to create regulations where they have to get approval to operate. Okay, that's good to know.
Precisely, yeah, and like I said, that can be done on a local level. So your town can pass an ordinance, you know, demanding that any data center in your town disclose. That can also be done on a state level, and the state could demand that any data center coming in the state can disclose. And it can be done on the federal level. I didn't really mention federal reform that much because we don't see it as particularly winnable path right now, but it's worth keeping in mind. You know, it's worth like shifting in the vein of shifting what's possible. You know, at some point we might be able to pass like stronger NEPA regulations on a federal level as well to regulate it there. But what level you choose is kind of just based on, you know, like, is your town amenable? You know, like, is it going to be easy to get them on board? You know, is the Montana State House amenable? You know, will it be easy to get them on board? So kind of just look for where your avenues of best kind of like likelihood to win are, and then you can definitely like fighting for transparency is a great way to ensure that they remain at least slightly accountable to us.
A statement and then a couple questions of one thing I saw on the, you know, where to identify where are data centers coming, you know, how do we identify that? One thing I didn't see that I didn't know if your organization was looking at was things like public filings, SEC filings, prospectuses, confidential investment memorandums. There's a lot of other information we could be looking at. I'm not sure if anyone's looking at that yet, but that also seems to invite an opportunity to use AI against itself with things like agentic scraping to, you know, look at the entire universe of stuff that's being filed to try to potentially get ahead of some of these as well. So happy to chat about that. I'm not sure if your
Please, yeah,
organization is
that's
doing
not
that.
within my wheelhouse, but it sounds like an excellent idea. I would love to connect about that.
And then the other question I have is, can you talk through a bit of I think you addressed it very intrinsically in your conversation, but what are the myths? What should we be watching out for? What are the proponents saying that should flag us to say, you know, this is great. It brings high paying jobs. It won't impact the environment. I'm sure it can say the corollary, the opposite of whatever you said today. But what is the heartstring tech story that we need to be watching out for? You know, we need to compete with China. We need to have AI, the revolution. Can you talk through that a bit? And is it in your gut?
Yeah, totally.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a great question. And I mean, there are many of them, but I think like the 10,000 foot level of that is, you know, AI is the future. We need it. It's coming. You can't stop it, and it will solve a lot of issues. You know, AI is like powerful and has the potential to, you know, solve the climate crisis, cure diseases. Not only that, we need it for public, you know, national security. So we need to compete, like you said, with China. And you know, there are lots of these great tech jobs. So don't worry, it may displace you from your industry, but you can, you know, go back to school and train to become an AI person, you know, and get retrained and join a new industry. And besides, it will open up a lot of leisure time and make your job less menial. You know, so there there are layers and layers and layers. And then they also say it's actually, you know, the concerns about water are overblown. Like, look at us, we're water positive. Look at us, you know, we don't actually use that much energy, and it doesn't matter how much energy we're using because when AI gets up to speed, it will solve all of our energy problems anyway. So, I mean, there are many. I guess the two I would address, like one thing I hear a lot in an environmental kind of standpoint is you know, like the data centers are becoming more efficient and the code is becoming more efficient. So it doesn't matter that they use a lot of energy because eventually they will solve that problem by becoming more efficient. I think that argument is fundamentally flawed because if you're what we see is the actual emissions and the actual like water use and the actual, energy use is going up year over year over year. The data centers may be coming in, I mean, they are becoming incrementally more efficient, but they are putting so many new data centers on the grid, that it doesn't matter if you have 20 data centers that are more efficient. If you have like 50 of those more efficient data centers, it's still going to use more energy, if that makes sense. So that's one myth that I hear a lot. And the other one is just like I said, this whole like AI is going to solve the problems, so we have to invest in it now, so it'll solve them later. That, I mean, who knows? Like, we can't predict the future, but what's happening now is AI is actually making a lot of these things worse. And when you follow the money and you follow where the AI is going, it's going into things that often do not serve us. So I would caution, I think it's part of a kind of a long-worn corporate playbook to sell us the idea of one thing and in fact, like, give us something else. For example, like one story I like to tell is about plastics recycling. I don't know if you all know this, but plastics recycling has always been a lie. And they introduced the concept of plastics recycling. And I'm saying you might know this because you're more educated than me, but I didn't know that. And I was like so into plastics recycling for a number of years. And it turns out, like recently, people investigated and found that they introduced the concept of plastics recycling when people started getting concerned that too much plastic was going to end up in the landfill. Communities actually started trying to regulate plastics. And then the company said, oh, look, we can recycle plastics. We can make all these new things with plastics. The whole time they knew that that was not viable. And they sold it to us anyway as a lie. And I'm really concerned that the same thing is going to happen with AI, where they're selling us this thing that they know is not viable, this thing they know is not going to come true. Like the actual use cases where AI is used for good, they exist, but they are not nearly as prevalent yet as the companies would like us to believe. And meanwhile, they are in fact doing something that is harming us. And, now we have microplastics in our water, we have microplastics in our food, we have microplastics everywhere. And it turns out plastics recycling was not viable. So I hope that makes sense. It's just like it's a corporate playbook. There are a million more examples of that where, they prop up a false solution to distract from the negative that they're doing in the moment.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name's Crystal. I'm the executive director of an organization called Honor the Earth. And so we've been focusing on the way that these data centers have been targeting native lands because there's lack of jurisdictional oversight and just all of the legal things. But I have two questions quickly. It's just one to see if you've encountered any tactics or strategies that have been effective in addressing the NDAs and breaking through those. We've been running into those left and right. Obviously, you're tracking that, but just curious if you're aware of any tactics or strategies that have worked. The other thing too is just thinking about if you're tracking any trends of the shift from municipalities because they've shown to be pretty effective. And now they're shifting gears towards fossil fuel impacted communities, rural communities, and Black, Indigenous communities, and seeing if y'all have any resources around what that trend looks like. Just because that's the work that we're doing. We have a tracker on our website too, and we're trying to populate that tracker.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Crystal. I'm a big fan of your work. I've been following the work that Honor the Earth has been doing on data centers. So thank you so much for all that you're doing. As far as the NDAs, I mean, sometimes a Freedom of Information Act request can be useful. I mean, sometimes they, so that's where you can, I'm not an I'm not a FOIA expert, but we work with people who are, but you can submit a request to your government to get information back that they legally have to release to people. And sometimes they don't release all of it even with that. So it's good to have someone with a legal background or a lawyer on hand to force them to release more. But in the cases where people have gotten stuff released through a FOIA request, we also were starting to compile a database of NDAs that different companies have sent. So then if you get if you have a copy of an NDA, even if the company is blacked out, you can compare it because a lot of times they'll use the same or similar NDAs and you can compare it in other places. So I'm happy to share that resource with you and your communities, so people can kind of compare the NDAs they're looking at to other ones, but it really is, and then I guess other things that we've seen work are getting a line local journalist to look into it, because a lot of times they'll be good at investigating in ways that, I do not have the background or skill set in. So if you have a local journalist, you can kind of give a tip to, and see if they want to write an article about it. It is a kind of a hot topic to cover. People are interested in data centers, and they can kind of work to uncover it that way. The other way, and this is kind of a depressing way that we don't want it would be great if this isn't how people found out, but there have been some communities where like officials or like have actually leaked the information by accident, so they'll get up in a meeting and they'll say the developer, Google, oh, I wasn't supposed to say that, and people then find out who's behind the proposal. That happened in Indiana. I just talked to someone who had that happen to in Maine. As far as your second question, we are not tracking that trends because I was under the impression that they have always been tracking and situating in low-income Black and Brown Indigenous communities. Just following the cycle of all environmental injustices. So there are Black and Brown communities who have been fighting data centers since the very beginning of the data center issue. Interestingly enough, Loudoun County, Virginia is like a very wealthy county where they got started, but since then there's the Memphis fight has been a fight about racial justice, first and foremost, and environmental injustice in a community that was already heavily targeted. And I know Indigenous communities, have also been doing a ton of work, not only to target the data centers, but also to connect it to the long histories of extractive mining, uranium mining, that not only is needed for the tech companies, but will be needed for the nuclear power, that tech companies are investing into to power the data centers. So I'd love to connect more, and I'd love to learn more about your work. And yeah, we'd love to amplify it and work together. But yes, huge problem. Thank you.
My name is Joni, and I wonder if you could talk about, well, let me ask it as a question. It seemed to me from just a little tiny bit of reading about growth that data centers seem to be have no limits. So every operation that takes place, every AI request is in there and part of the bank, and that will go on forever. There's no cleaning. There's no, okay, that's out, and now we have room for more. And is that true? That, now they're saying, okay, 1,400 kilowatts in Montana for 3 data centers. That's doubling what we currently use. So 2 years from now, would that be 600 kilowatts and then 1,200? There's no end. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right. And that's why I highlight, I feel like a lot of the conversation around data centers is about the impact of the data center facility itself. And that's why I highlight what's in the data centers, because we also have to look at kind of shrinking the use cases for AI itself and shrinking the kind of compute they use in order to kind of combat the AI boom, is my opinion. So there was one just kind of telling example where the government of England told people to delete old emails because they were in a drought so that they could put less strain on the data centers. And that is, really just, it's like the same kind of, there are companies that are storing so many, megabytes of information on us without our consent at all. It should not be on us to delete our old emails to save water. But that is kind of the future we're coming to. So another kind of avenue of activism that I didn't talk about today, but it's another angle on the issue, is to advocate at the company level, for them to have mandatory data deletion policies. After 6 years, they should delete everyone's data. After 4 years, they should delete everyone's data. There should be disclosure agreements where they disclose what data they're collecting about us, what they're using it for, and they should not be allowed to collect any unnecessary data or data that's not affiliated with their purpose. But yeah, that is definitely true, and it will just keep kind of going the more data that they are allowed to store on us with impunity and do not have to delete currently.
My name is Francesca, and I just want to know, after listening to you, is there any benefits that a data center brings?
It's a good, we need some data centers, and we will always need some data centers because, I'm not planning on stopping using the internet. I'm not planning on stopping sending emails. We use the cloud and interact with the cloud every day. So it's not so much an issue of, our data center is wholly good or our data center is wholly bad. What I am trying to focus on is just the AI boom as a whole and the massive scale out that's like not benefiting us. So data centers will always have some problems associated with the development of them, but we do need data centers. And the solution for that is to produce them in a way that's very community led, that's done in concert with the community, where the community gets to decide, where they want to site the data center that they need, that might not be good, but it's done equitably, it's done without kind of sacrificing certain communities. And it's done at a level and a speed that matches like the renewable energy that we have available, then matches the kind of the water we have available. So like data centers are just a part of the world, but they can be and should be developed in a way that's wholly different from what we're seeing and is wholly more kind of responsible to communities, in my opinion.
Love that caveat. That thing you said about England, I have friends in England. I used to live there. Is that true or not?
What?
Sorry, what you just said about the story that clean up your old email to reduce the
That's
storage capacities.
Like, will that work?
Well, I know it'll work.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is that a true story?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I've been
Yeah.
wondering about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, so we all use data centers. I mean, like you just said, my email address is 30 years old and I can go back to 1997 and get emails. And so that is stored on a data center somewhere. And, I should clean it up. But what I'm wondering is, are there any statistics about showing the overall usage? Is it, because AI is getting a lot of the criticism, but is it, what's taking, is it email? Is it Amazon orders? Is it the grocery store thing, or is it AI? Are there any data on what percentages of data is being stored in data centers?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't have the exact statistics, but the reason AI gets the criticism is because AI is just like miles more energy intensive than the email storage, than the Amazon orders. Like it's great to be concerned about one's own impact on the earth, and we all should and probably are if you're here in this crowd. But it just pales in comparison to what Google uses every day. So for example, Google recently started putting those AI search results at the top of every single, like a Google search. And just by doing that, they are using so much more energy and, water and, all the other things we talked about, because collecting that AI search is so much more energy intensive than just doing a regular Google search. So it's kind of an issue of like, I do try to recycle, I do try to, use less water, obviously because I care about the earth, but each of our actions kind of pales in comparison to these corporate and governmental and like AI company impacts, so not only should we be cognizant of our own email inboxes, but we really have to organize to make sure that they stop doing what they're doing, because it's, it's still gonna get us, even if we all have the cleanest email inboxes with only a year's worth of email saved. But thank you. I hope that answers your question. Right. And we can't. And that's what I was saying. That's what the meme about, the unwanted AI comes in. And that's another kind of way to be an activist and to help this. You can opt out of each one by putting like -AI at the end. And there are also some cool campaigns going on where people are doing like AI opt out or AI boycott campaigns. But right now the company is putting it everywhere intentionally. And it's something called, I forget what it's called, but it's some sort of like design term where they're like really incentivizing us to use it because they think they're going to make a lot of money off of it. And they've also invested so much money in it that they need us to use it to give them a return on their investment. So there's a reason that they aren't letting us opt out, which is that they want to make sure that we use AI, become hooked on AI. Yeah. Sorry, I know that you have
Ready for one more?
Yes. Oh, we have time for a couple more, I think.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. So you mentioned some things about taxes, the property taxes, and Montana not having a sales tax. Can you talk about so that's good for the companies, right? So what would be the best setup to maybe make it a little harder? And I guess I don't really understand the direct question or the direct correlation between not having a sales tax and how that benefits them.
Yeah.
So can you just kind of
Yeah.
explore that a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. So
Thank you.
So the reason that states and municipalities have taxes is to fund like public goods, right? I mean, in the best, most charitable view of our tax system. So not having a sales tax means that everyone really benefits, because you don't pay a sales tax on your goods, but also when businesses come, who are purchasing at a much higher like a amount, they also don't have to pay a sales tax. So I wouldn't focus on that per se, because we're not going to probably undo that, and probably many of you would not want to undo that, I'm sure. But the takeaway was that not only are they not paying their sales tax like everyone else, but they're also paying much lower property taxes than homeowners, than farm managers. And that is a problem because, like a data center is coming in and only paying 0.9% on their property taxes, whereas a farmer is paying 2%. So they have billions of trillions of dollars that they could be investing in our community, and they're actually getting away with investing far less and paying far less. And we are losing that money for like many, many, many years. In some cases, they give them like a 20-year tax abatement. So that's like 20 years over which we're going to lose millions and millions of dollars that we could have in revenue. And it's kind of like a race to the bottom where different states, make these incentives to try to attract data centers to the states. Because they think, if they don't have the incentives and the next state does, then the data centers are going to go there instead. But A, like that's fine. And B, the data centers are not even looking at the incentives and subsidies we've found as the primary driver of where they're siting. Like at this point, there are so many data centers that they're trying to bring on grid that they're much more concerned with where they can connect to the grid quickly and the availability of reliable electricity. So it's really not going to hurt the state all that much if they raise their taxes to the same level that everyone else has. I hope that answers your question.
I guess I'm concerned about the amount of money these companies have to grease the pockets of the people who may give them the okay to do this.
Yeah.
And are you guys tracking that, or could you want to just talk a little bit about that?
I mean, we're not tracking that, and they have huge amounts of money. And I guess the only thing I would say to that, like, yes, like corporate money in politics has always been a problem. And what we've tried to show here is that people, still have been successful. Like we just have to know where our power lies, and our power lies in, disruptive power, people power, solidarity power, and to a certain extent, like economic power. We can boycott, we can say we're not gonna, and so we just have to examine where we have power versus where they have power, and just convince, not convince, but show our politicians that, we will not vote for them, and we will not support their candidacy if they are listening too much to corporate actors and not us. But it is definitely, it's not easy, and the companies will do everything they can and continue to, lobby to the best of their abilities and donate money to try to steer things their way, for sure.
Yeah, hi, my name is Lyle Courtnage. I think one of the things that a comment is maybe not to say that AI is inherently bad, because actually it's pretty good. And I use AI quite a bit myself, but it's the bad part of generating the power for AI to be successful that we need to make sure that we keep focused on, and the strategies that you had up here. So, I mean, it's not necessarily bad that, if somebody was using a lot of, solar and wind and the water part is, I'd like to see how they're handling some of that, but that's just, I guess, kind of a comment and get kind of your feedback on that part.
Yeah. What I would kind of like the takeaway to be is that, AI is not good or bad. It's a tool, but we don't have to accept the bad parts with the good. So we should be able to say, like these parts of AI serve us, these parts do not. And we don't want a data center that will be used to, say, like store millions of people's emails that are then used to target them for a genocide, which is a real use of AI. Or we shouldn't be able to say, like we should be able to say what we want and what we don't want, and AI is not all bad, but it's also not all good. And there are many uses that don't serve us, but yet the data centers are continuously being built in our communities, taking our water, taking our electricity. And we don't want those, and we do need to slow down the rate at which AI is being built to get it back within limits of what our society can kind of support, and our planet can support. Thank you for that.
Oh, thanks, Nicole. This is amazing. So Two questions. One is, how much of the AI is dedicated to military use, like flying drones and all of the things that we don't know the military using? And how vulnerable are these centers to things like electromagnetic pulses? And what would happen? I guess there was one in California that burned, caught on fire. What's the impact of that?
Yeah, those are both excellent questions. I don't have figures for how much AI is used for the military because, again, the data center operators keep their uses very tightly controlled. They say it's like, national security, and they're not allowed to tell us. So that means when we do find out what a certain data center is used for, what a certain AI is used for, it's usually through a leak, or like a investigation. So we need more like military whistleblowers to tell us how much they're using AI, but we don't have access to that information. But we know that they are using it. We know that manless drones are on the battlefield in Ukraine. And we know that the Israeli army has been using AI like pretty extensively, and some of that has been leaked by the tech employees themselves. So we do have a better handle on what they've been using AI for. But it is used by the military a lot, and they do see it as like a very potent weapon, for future wars. To your second question, wait, will you remind me what your second question was? Oh, right. Yes. Pretty vulnerable. Do you guys, I don't know if you all remember a couple weeks ago, like Amazon Web Services, like big parts of the internet kind of like stopped working for a bit on a Monday morning. I know that I couldn't sign into like my Slack, which we use at work. I know that some payment apps were down. I know that like some entire like websites, like I heard the entire website of the country of England was down. I'm sorry to keep picking on England today. And that was due to a data center like error. I'm not sure exactly what kind. I'm not a technologist myself, but there was an error at a like maybe 5 data center, one data center complex that Amazon uses in Northern Virginia that brought like huge parts of the internet to a screeching halt. So it's definitely a problem, and along with the whole like AI being kind of foisted on us and being put on us in ways that we didn't ask for, like as like I recently bought a new refrigerator, and I had to work really hard to find a refrigerator that was not a smart refrigerator. Like I don't need a smart refrigerator. I don't need my refrigerator to be like telling me things, but having those capabilities then makes it vulnerable to those kind of like data center impacts, as well as then like increasing the use cases for the data centers. So as they make more and more products like smart, and as we kind of get AI integrated into more parts of our lives, it does kind of increase the fragility of the whole system for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicole. We're going to go one final question, and it's on Zoom. And they were asking, well, we have a data center proposal 30 miles north of here in Broadview, which plans to, they say, use a lot of renewable energy, if not all renewable energy, to power the energy needs of that data center, which is up to 1 gigawatt in 2 phases. And so just getting your thoughts on how possible that is for, the amount of power that needs and what that amount of power really means for like just the grid in general. Love to hear.
Yeah. I don't know exactly, but I would urge that person to ask hard questions to the people in charge of the project. Just ask them exactly where that renewable energy is coming from, what the sources are of it. We have definitely seen cases where data center companies are really using some kind of shady greenwashing tactics to call certain things renewable that like I personally would not consider renewable, like I said, carbon capture and storage, carbon offsets. So I would urge them to be really clear about what kind of renewable energy the data center is using. And yeah, beyond that, I can't speak to the feasibility, not knowing more of the details, but I would definitely go in with a healthy amount of skepticism and asking the questions and kind of doing the digging and finding out exactly where it's being procured, what it's being used for now, like how fast, and do they have a plan, for if they can't get it on grid fast enough, are all questions I would ask. Okay, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk with all of you.